Welcome back to MMPH-005 Organizational Development and Change, Block 4 Role of Change Agent, Unit 14 Managing Resistance to Change. We will be covering the nature of resistance, reasons for resistance, sources of individual resistance, sources of organizational resistance, types of resistance, implications of resistance, organization culture, methods of handling resistance, techniques for managing resistance. Nature of resistance. Any change is definitely a very complex process. The uncertainties which is caused by the change resulting in equilibrium results in resistance to change. And one of the most challenging and confusing and baffling problems faced by managers in handling change is employees' resistance to change. The resistance may be explicit in the form of like voicing disagreement, any kind of strike, go slow in the work procedures, employee turnover or implicit in form of like loss of loyalty, lowering of moral, absence, avoidance, and low tolerance. There are various reasons for this resistance. So, we will be talking about the reasons for resistance. The main reason behind employees' resistance is the underlying fear, anxiety caused by uncertainties of change. In most situations, resistance comes out of individuals' problem rather than any kind of technical problems. Resistance is often because of the attitudinal factors and blind spot which the functional specialists have as a result of their concern for and preoccupation with technical aspects of new ideas. One of the common reasons for resistance or for resisting change is the feeling of discomfort with the nature of change itself, which may violate their moral belief system. Another reason for resistance may be the method by which the change is introduced. This is observed when authoritarian approach is used and people are not informed. That means they are it means here that when the people are forcibly made to accept the change. That means they will resist change because they will feel discomfort about it. So, this is observed when authoritarian approach is used and people are not informed. Other reasons for resistance may be inequity, where the people or the employees feel that someone is likely to get greater benefit than they are likely to get. So, this belief is that first, if the employees are not informed properly from beforehand, that a change will be taking place and how they should be accepting those changes, then definitely they will try to resist that kind of change. Or else, when change is done forcibly to the organization and employees are made to accept that change forcibly, so definitely the employees will have some kind of resistance towards that kind of change. So, Coach and French conducted a study in a clothing factory. So the researchers worked with four groups of employees who were paid on a piece rate basis. As a part of this research design, their mode of payment was slightly modified. This was followed by a simple change in their method of work. So the researchers wondered if there had been incidents of resistance. The groups were matched on various parameters, and the only independent variables introduced was nature of participation. The study revealed that the different modes of participation used with four experimental groups brought different results. The group with no participation had the highest drop in its output, and its output remained at this level for the entire period of 30 days. So, this drop in output occurred immediately after the introduction of change. Resistance appeared in the form of aggression against their management, hostility towards supervisor, drop in production, inadequate cooperation with the supervisor. So it was observed that 17% of the employees left the job during the first 40 days of introduction of change. So it is generally assumed that the resistance is only negative and bad. The fact is that resistance to change is neither good nor bad. The only difference may be whether it is based on the sound principles or not. A positive approach to resistance. Resistance has usually been seen in negative terms. Most of the people consider it as negative. The proponents of a change are unhappy with the resistance shown by some persons or group of persons. The general experience has been that in many cases resistance play a positive role. If individuals and groups had not resisted some changes like urbanization of some rural or forest areas or construction of roads which disturb ecological balance and so on, we would have been poorer in our ecological heritage. In the flash of enthusiasm, the proponents of a change do not see some negative and often unintended consequences of change. Resistance sometimes also help to bring some of these to their notice. So resistance can be done if they are seeing some that it is being hampering something, like the most common example is the ecological heritage. If it is hampering the ecological heritage, it is quite evident, it is quite correct to resist that kind of change. Resistance also bring notice of the planners and likely difficulties in the implementation of the change. So, resistance at least give some kind of warnings which if needed can lead to a better implementation of change. Resistance may bring to the attention of those involved in introducing change factors that are likely to disrupt the basic cultural fabric or threaten core values of the group. The earlier attention is paid to them, the better it is likely to be for the change program. Resistance may also point out some flaws in the process of introducing the change. If a change is being introduced by the outsider in the organization or the community, it will not be owned by them. Resistance may show lack of ownership of the change program by the community in which it is being introduced. So resistance may show that process of change has to be quite participative in nature. Resistance may therefore be helpful in bringing attention to some aspects which has been neglected by the change planners. Threat to the core values and the lifestyles, unintended disturbances causing problems, bad process of introducing the change. Resistance can be used for making the change process more effective. Whenever there is a kind of a resistance, there will be some kind of discussion so that this change process can be implemented in a better form. So, taking such positive approach to resistance, Carp suggested a four-step approach to take resistance as shown in the following figure or table. This actually relates to bringing out resistance, that means surfacing, by encouraging people to express their resistance, giving importance to it as reflected in listening and acknowledging, exploring the reasons of resistance to learn what can be done, and rechecking after analyzing if still the resistance is substantial. So the first four steps include, the first one is surfacing. That means you need to make expression of the resistance safe. Then you have to ask for it all. Then how you are honoring in the second step, if you are honoring, that means it is to listen, to acknowledge, reinforce permission to resist. And the third step includes exploring, that means distinguish authentic from pseudo resistance. And the last one is rechecking, that means you need to probe to that whether all these things have been done in a right way or not. Now, the language of resistance, resistance may shows that some persons are threatened by change. If resistance is not legitimized, it is likely to come out in the different ways of expressing difficulties with change. Various alibis are likely to be given against the change process. And in the absence of legitimate channels of exploring the dissent, the language of alibis is likely to distract the attention to non issues. Murthy has suggested a large number of alibis people use for resistance to change. So this has been shown in the table for 14.2, which we will be discussing in the next slide. So the more an organization encourages and analyzes resistance, the less the alibis are likely to be used. Now, the first one, the alibis for resistance to change from PVR Murthy's Managing Change, which is unpublished. First one is bad theory alibis. That means they will be talking about this is all theory. Theory is different from practice. It is nice to hear and easy to say, but difficult to practice. We have been doing it for last 30 years. It is not the best solution. Let us get the best solution, then we shall implement it. And we have to get more facts. Let us form a committee. Now, next one is unsuitable alibi, like we are not in Japan. We all should visit Japan if we have to believe all that. Next, we are all divided by caste, community, etc. So we can't bring any kind of changes. It won't work in our country. We tried it before and it actually didn't work. The other company tried and they gave up. No one can help us. Company is beyond repair. We are not yet ready. We don't have money for all these changes. We don't have time at all. Then unacceptable to other LBs, like I follow, but our people are bad. I understand, but others cannot. It is not my problem. The problem is with the government. The problem is with the top management. Boss won't like it. All problems are because of top management incompetency. My bosses should first change. The problem is with the middle management. The problem is with the supervisor. The union won't like it. The problem is with the inter-union conflict. The workmen can never understand. The old employees won't understand. The the younger employees do not have patience. Our youngsters do not have maturity. Next one is no gains alibis. Like, we are not paid for Japanese salaries. What do I get out of this change? Why should I work for the change? Last year I worked hard, but what did I get in turn? Why do we have to stretch ourselves? Suggested all that long back. Nobody bothered at that time. Why should I listen to them now? And last, like, benefits are limited. Why trouble ourselves? Lack of knowledge, that is sources of individual resistance. First one is lack of knowledge. In any situations when people do not have the right information, sufficient knowledge about the causes and effects of change, they feel anxious and stressed, and consequently they will be resisting to change. So employee also resist change because it threatens their needs for security, self-esteem, competence, status, and social interaction. So change reaction effects are seen in feeling of insecurity and the change of working situations or job. Change can have cascading effects. When one person receives promotion, it leads to promotion of 10 other peoples at lower levels. This is quite indicative of change reaction effects of a single precipitating event. Next is selective perception. When change is introduced, employees are more concerned about how it affects them personally rather than how it would affect the entire organization. This is often observed when mode of payment is changed or reorganization is done. Also, individuals assess the compatibility of the change with their beliefs and value systems. Fear of uncertainty. There will be definitely, if it is a fear of unknown, if we do not know what is going to happen, we'll have some kind of fear. That is, some kind of uncertainty is there. We are not sure about the results. So, there definitely will have a fear. Certainly, about the effects of the change personally and professionally is another reason for individual resistance. The threat perceived by the employees may be quite imaginary, intended or not, or unintended, big or might be small, direct or indirect. A number of fears like loss of status, power, income, and uncertainty about their ability to cope with the work demand come in the way of accepting the change. Next comes aversion to risk. Change threatens those who like comfort of familiar. Definitely, we won't be happy to disrupt or disturb our comfort zone. Whenever there will be a change, our comfort zone will be disturbed, because whatever we are practicing on day to day basis, we won't be doing the same thing. We will be going for a change process. Therefore, the change threatens those who like the comfort of familiar. Change often requires personal transitions wherein familiar has to be destabilized. It calls for giving up the status quo, unlearning, or unfreezing the present to integrate and absorb new learning. It is interesting that a number of individuals consider change to bring new opportunities. Research findings also support the view that positive approach to change results in opportunities for individuals during the transition period. Inertia of a structure. A number of built-in mechanisms provide stability to the organizations. Every organization has got its own systems, processes, policies, and procedures which ought to be followed for uniformity and formalization of the process. Consequently, any change in the structural aspect has cascading effect on the other related systems and processes. This creates a hurdle in, in introducing organizational change. In organizations where structural changes are introduced, it takes a long for period to accept and assimilate the structural change. Threat to power dynamics. Structural change with ensuing changes in decision making pattern can destabilize power relationship established over a period of time. Change in decision making process from centralized decision making to participative or democratic decision making can threaten managers affected by it. Group pressures, that mean there are the sources of organizational resistance which we are dealing with. Again, group pressures, that mean group norms evolved by an organization over years become a bottleneck in bringing about change. So it is quite common observation that a single member of a group accept change suggested by the management willingly. However, his group affiliation with the union does not actually allow him to do so. Therefore, he is likely to resist change. That means individually he may accept the change, but while he is part of the group, he may not accept the change and he will resist the change. Blinker view of change. Any organization consists of four basic elements, namely the task, structure, technology, and people. So, focus on any one of the elements of the organization will bring about corresponding change in other elements as well. Therefore, change cannot be introduced in one subsystem without affecting the others. Change cannot have lopsided and limited perspective. Now, sources of organizational resistance. This tables like shows the forces of resistance to change in individual and organization. Like when we are talking about individual, first one is homeostatis. Sorry, which means the tendency to revert to the old ways. That means something is introduced, and again you are having a tendency to go back to the old ways. Next comes habit, that is ingrained, accustomed ways of doing the things. Primacy, that means the first experience powerfully determining our actions. Next comes selective perception and retention, which means using one's own ideas. Dependence, that means learning from role models becoming internalized. Self distrust, sorry, then comes superego, which means internalized traditions determining the behavior. And last one is self distrust, which means blaming oneself rather than seeking the external change. Next comes to organization. Now, organization deals first with conformity to norms, that means tendency to follow the known ways of behavior. Next comes systematic and cultural coherence, that means tendency to remain homogeneous. Third one is vested interest, that means groups or individuals affected by change. Fourth one is psychoconcern, which means some areas having strong emotional sensitivity. Last one is rejection of outsiders, that means the question of ownership. Considering both the individuals and the organization, there are again 10 sources of resistance as suggested in the following table, where we will be discussing in the next section. That mean first we will first discuss about the sources of organizational resistance. That mean first one is the group pressure. Group pressures, which mean group norms evolved by an organization over the years become actually the bottleneck in bringing about a change. It is very common observation and that a single member of a group accept the change suggested by the management very willingly. When a single person is approached and how he is accepting the change, he will be accepting these changes with easily. But his group affiliation with any kind of union does not actually allow him to do so. Therefore, he is likely to resist a change. Now, Blicker view of change, that means any organization consists of four basic, and that means we have discussed these all the things which cover the task, structure, technology, and people. So, this is actually how one has to design and one has to be prepared for all those things. Then we are talking about the resistance of change. First one is your emotional resistance, and second is your rational resistance. So, when we are talking about emotional resistance, it occurs due to employees' attitude and feeling about change. So, feeling of insecurity, loss of self esteem, fear of unknown, desire of status quo, or mistrust in the management are some of the possible sources. And when we are talking about rational resistance, it is actually based on reasoning, logic, disagreement with the fact. So it may result from the actual time and the effort required adjusting to the change and the time given to adjust those changes. This call will be resolved by adjusting the time requirement, some kind of extra efforts to be put into the maybe putting into what kind of new learning is there, economic cost of change, technical feasibility of change, and reducing possibility of less desirable conditions. Now, implications of resistance. For any change which has to be accepted by the employees cooperatively, it is important for managers to anticipate and handle the employees. Only looking at the technical and logical dimension of change will not actually help, as the change is finally to be accepted and implemented by the employees themselves. Recognizing the effect on social factors is extremely important for the success of any kind of change efforts. And it has to be born in the minds of that people are different. Their response to the change would also be different, which may range from moderate support to weak support or even opposition to change. Managers responsible for these kind of change need to develop a, a good climate of trust with positivity feeling towards most of the changes. That means they have to give proper information that how this change which is being implemented will be benefit to the individuals who are working with the organization. So it is observed that when management is not able to win the support of the employees, they use authority. But if it is overused, it will defeat the purpose. That means if the management is seeing that change is not accepted in a good way or in a very cooperative way by the employees, they use the power of authority. That means they will make the employees bound to accept the change. But again, if you are very hard, or if you are using this authority as maybe overused, you are overusing the power of authority, so it will actually defeat the purpose, and it will not be helping to the organization in implementing the change in a proper way. Therefore, the authority needs to be used only sparingly, and the other methods handling resistance to change can be tried out. Now, for any change to be accepted by the, it is important to for the managers to actually anticipate and handle the employees. Only looking at the technical and logical dimension of it will not actually help, and it won't be accepted, because we know that we are helping the, we will be only helping the employees who will be actually implementing, because it is not the new task, new opportunities, it is the people who will be accepting those changes properly, and they will be only implementing those change, and they will be part of the change. So it is quite evident that whenever a change is implemented, it is seen that the employees accept it positively and they are willing to cooperate, so that change is taken up in a successful manner. Next comes to organizational culture. It is actually represented by the norms, the values, expectation, and the ways of thinking and behaving of people in the organization. So, as the culture evolves over a period of time, it becomes the part and parcel of the organizational life. Any attempt to change the established assumptions and approved ways of performing various tasks is sure to meet this kind of resistance, because once a culture has been established by the organization, it becomes part and parcel of the organization, and people talk about how is their organizational culture, because many people who are associated with the organizational culture since long, they prefer and they try to name it as they are facing a good culture or a bad culture in the organization. And many, and it actually it is like a brand to the organization when you have a good organizational culture that is supportive, a cohesive culture which will be supporting the employees who are working in the organization. Now, methods of handling resistance. There are some methods like first is communicate effectively. One of the most effective ways to reduce the resistance is to communicate with the employees and help them see the logic behind using the, or giving them the logic behind introducing to a change. Because once any kind of change is implemented, people will take some time to accept those things, and prior to that, the employees of the organization have to be communicated properly in a transparent way, that why the change is taking place and what are the reasons that the change is taking place for the organization, and what are the benefits if the change is implemented in the organization. So if these things are being clearly communicated to the internal employees who are associated with the organization, then it becomes easier on part of the organization to implement the change and to see the change process as a successful one. So it is often observed that lack of knowledge and ignorance is cause of individual resistance, and this can be taken care of maybe through good communication on one to one or one on one basis, or through group presentations, circulars, or reports. That means employees have to be communicated clearly about the change process taking place in the organization. Now, this strategy would work where source of resistance is lack of knowledge and inadequate management employees relation and of communication. There is another method of handling resistance is the participative decision making. That means since security and self esteem are underlying fears of resistance to change, involvement of employees in decision making will bring down resistance and they will get an opportunity to express their opinion and views. Such an approach will work when the employee sees that the management has employee interest in mind. However, the flip side of this strategy is it is quite time consuming and may sometimes lead to poor quality decision. Next one is the method is negotiation. That means another method which is used by the change agent is to deal with the potential resistance to change, that is to offer of something of value to the reduce this resistance. I mean, it is usually adopted when some powerful source is behind resistance. Offer a good package for VRS, golden handshake, that is memorandum of understanding, that is MOU, of non retrenchment, are some of the tactics that are used by the organizations to manage these kinds of resistance. Through negotiations, though we have seen that though negotiations help us to or help the organization to overcome resistance in many situations, one cannot actually ignore the high cost involved in it and the risk of exposure of the negotiator to the members of his group or powerful position holders. Next is co-optation and manipulation. Co-optation involves manipulation or participation. Essentially, it offers a key role to the leaders or a group who is actually resisting change in the decision making process. So, in this method, the leader's opinions is invited largely for endorsement of the change agent's views. Manipulation involves distorting facts or withholding unacceptable information and making of facts in a way to look very attractive and acceptable. In such kind of situation, the change agent will lose its faith before the group. Both cooperation and manipulation are inexpensive method to win over resistance. So this would work so long as affected party is not aware that they are being exploited or cheated. Then it's providing support. Resistance to change can be minimized by providing proper support to the employees to alleviate their anxiety and fear. Organizations use employee counseling or mentoring and therapy to take care of the negative effects of the change. Organizations, we can take example of Tisco, which have provided training in new skills, short paid leaves of absence, and absorption in other concern. The shortcomings of this tactics are that it is expensive and there is no guarantee actually of success in adopting this kind of tactics or methodology. Coercion, that means it is by some kind of force or some that is made of compulsion. So coercion is applying some kind of threat or pressurizing the employees implicitly or explicitly to accept, that is change under donors, that is situations of closure of a plant or downsizing or bankruptcy could be some of the examples of the implicit coercion. Other example of this found in organizations are adverse or very bad performance evaluation, transfer or any kind of threat of transfer, and depriving some employees from promotions. Coercion should be used as the last resort. It leaves bitterness behind. Therefore, it is not a very good method for managing change. Techniques for managing resistance. First one is counseling. So this has been found to be quite very effective in reducing individuals' resistance. Individuals' resistance occurs because of many things like anxieties and fear, and by letting people talk through their problems and anxieties can help them come to the terms with the change. So this technique is used on one to one and also in formal communication system with the whole team. Next comes force field analysis. This technique provides an assessment of any change situation and presents a balance between the driving forces and the resisting forces, because it is where you have to see that what are the driving forces and what are the resisting forces. The participants are advised by the change agent to identify these forces. While identifying the restraining forces, the group develops insight about the ways of handling them. In a number of organizations, this technique is used effectively to create a shared change process for thinking through specific changes. Because when you are having two components, what are the driving forces and what are the resisting forces? That means you are seeing the positive aspects of the change and what are the negative aspects of the change. So when the number of positive aspects of the change is higher to the negative aspects of the change, then the employees will themselves be motivated to accept those changes. Because once the employees notes down, they jotted down like what are the driving forces for the change. I mean, what are the good opportunities if the organization is implementing change, and then again listing out what are the challenges or what are the resisting forces which is actually opposing this kind of change. And definitely when the driving forces or driving forces factors outnumber the resisting forces factors, then employees will be very much clear enough that change is good for the organization. Now, commitment charting. In any change, there will be people who gain and others who will be losing. Therefore, in order to get the commitment of people who are likely to lose, it is quite important to handle them with care, as they will be sensitive to any action. For a change to succeed, it is important to have a critical mass and also to minimize the pain it causes to the affected. In order to do that, a chart can be prepared listing the names of the key players and their commitment level to the change. The chart will indicate the status of people who have commitment at present and whose commitment needs to be ensured for the change to be successful in the organization. Also, the people who have no commitment need to be focused for gaining commitment. Now, Watson in 1969 has suggested some ways of reducing or preventing resistance. These relate to ownership of change, nature of change, and the process of changing. First one is ownership. That means resistance is likely to be low if the change is perceived, is being need of and suggested. That means you are being owned at by those affected by it, and when it has the top management support. So this will be reducing or preventing some kind of resistance because you own it and you have a good support from the top management. Next is nature of change. So this resistance is likely to be less if the change is seen as reducing problems and burdens, conforming to the core values of the group, offering new and interesting experience to the group, and does not threaten any kind of autonomy or security. Next come change process. Resistance can be reduced by joint and agreed diagnosis of the problem. Consensus on the board, a broad design of the change, listening to the objections, that means learning from them, some kind of periodical reviews and feedback, development of high interpersonal trust and cohesive teams, and openness to revision. Now, there are various, the a table which we are talking about, the resistance to change. That means here we were talking about how it will be. See, we were talking about in organization, the last point, the rejection of outsiders, that is question of, and here we will be talking about what is the 10 sources of resistance as suggested in table 14.4. So here we will be discussing about the 14.4, the sources of resistance and coping mechanisms. That means the sources of resistance are first like perceived peripherality of change. Next is perception of imposition. Third is indifference of top management. Fourth is vested interest. Fifth is complacency and inertia. Sixth is fear of large scale disturbance. Seventh is fear of inadequate resource. Eighth one is fear of obsolescence. Ninth is fear of loss of power. Tenth one is fear of overload. So we will be discussing in details these resistance or with how these resistance can be helped for coping these resistance. That means for perceived peripherality, we have participation in diagnosis, participation in involvement for perception imposition. So here we will be discussing all details. Like first one is perceived peripherality of change. If the executives perceive that change which is being introduced in the organization is not critical for them or their units, and they are likely to resist such a change. Implementation of change can be effective if the change introduced is seen as critical and useful. This can be achieved by involving the concerned managers in the diagnosis for the use or for the issues or the problems, so that they can appreciate the need for change. Their attitude to innovation introduced will then be positive. Next is perception in imposition. Similarly, if the managers in an organization see the change as being imposed by the corporate or the head office, they are likely to resist the change. Such resistance can be reduced by involving them in the introduction of change at several stages. So this can be done through seminars, work groups to be involved, the various part of the change program, the task forces to work out details of implementation. So participation of the managers at various stages of change increases the commitment to change. Next come indifference of top management. The behavior and attitude of top management are important and critical in implementing this kind of changes. If the top management do not show much enthusiasm or interest in the change process, the people at the lower level will put up as increased resistance to it. So the top management can show their interest by frequently getting information and feedback on the progress of change, participating in some of the seminar organized to discuss the experiences, meeting new occupants of new roles created as a part of change, providing positive strokes, that means some kind of encouragements and appreciations on the success of experiences, and mentioning the experiment in the significant documents such as annual reports and etc. Now comes to vested interest. Now the change produces some kind of disturbances and sometimes some dislocation. For example, if an organization creates some new units which are located in smaller towns, so people moving to smaller towns from capital cities will be definitely facing some problems and experience some kind of inconveniences. So, as a result of this, they are likely to resist the change. So, they may, of course, give different reasons which may appear logical. However, once they go and work in a smaller town, they may enjoy the change and may see it in a positive aspect. Complacency and inertia. As a general rule, change produces discomfort. People develop complacency while being in one state. The change of state is somewhat painful. The solution of the problem is to introduce change and help people experience new conditions. Then the resistance usually goes down. Fear of large scale disturbance. In a large scale organization, there may be a genuine fear that the proposed change is likely to lead some changes with unpredictable consequences. This is particularly true if the proposed change is a sensitive area and the required special skills. As already discussed, phasing of the change program may reduce resistance arising out of this dimension. Resistance to change is not always bad. It plays a positive role as we have discussed previously, that mean in indicating the areas of potential failures or problems which may come in the way of the effectiveness of the change or system. Now, preventive sanctions such as experimentation, adjustment, phasing, etc., may be quite helpful. Fear of inadequate resources. Resistance may also increase if the implementation of change requires some kind of additional resources in the form of maybe new skills, additional manpower, or budget. Provisions of such resource support may reduce some kind of resistance, and it may, however, be examined whether there is a genuine need of genuine need for these kind of sources. For example, if a new unit is created with greater autonomy, the support of planning, personnel, and technology may be provided to help the units to succeed in meeting their objectives. Because once any kind of changes are being implemented, so one fear like inadequate resources, whenever these additional resources which are actually genuine and is required for the change process to be implemented successfully have to be provided at the right time to the employees. This will actually motivate those employees that yes, we are being provided with those resources and we can go for the changes. Now, fear of obsolescence. Now, resistance to change may also be high in the change required new skills, and the existing people may feel that because of lack of those skills, they may become obsolete. So, this may be a big threat, and resistance can be partly reduced if the concerned people are giving some kind of orientation and are trained in the new skill which is actually being which will be implemented. So for example, introduction of HRD may succeed if the existing functionaries in the personnel or the organizational planning department are given enough training in new functions so that they feel very confident in carrying out these things very effectively. Now, the next one is fear of loss of power. Sometimes resistance to change is high if there is some kind of feeling as a result of change, some roles will actually lose the power. When we are taking one example like creating a new planning roles may raise such fears as the planning functionaries may not get these operational powers, or creating a new unit may deprive the existing top managers of the operational powers being delegated to the units. Such resistance can be reduced if the roles are again redefined and redesignated so that the concerned who is at the role of the occupant can perceive that they have some different kinds of powers which may be of a higher order, although in different nature. So the involved roles may be helped to realize the power. Therefore, sometimes we have to manage, especially which is related to the designations, maybe it may be reorganized, may be renamed, so that this power, the loss of power by which was felt by the employees can be managed very tactically. And the last one is talking about fear of overload. If some people feel that the change will increase their workload, they will definitely resist to the change which is being implemented in the organization. So this may happen if they perceive that the new functions being assigned to their roles. However, if their roles are defined and they are able to mainly prioritize the function and decide which functions which can be delegated to their subordinates, the resistance can be reduced and can be handled correctly. So this would require seminars on role definition and clarity and negotiation for delegation of some functions. So the techniques for managers that will open to be adapted may also depend on situation, like Maheshwari has suggested overall 6 strategies which each would work as a special situation, that is education and communication, participation and involvement, facilitation and support, negotiation and agreement, manipulation and cooperation, explicit or implicit coercion. So that's all for this module. Thank you very much.